Thank you so much, everyone, for coming to our session. My name is Laura Roddy, and I'm a 3rd, 4th, and 5th grade special education resource teacher at Minneapolis Public Schools. I've been in Minneapolis for 6 years, and I've been a K-12 special education teacher for 14 years. And yes, today is a school day, so I'm taking a break here, my little Chicago vacation. Again, thank you so much for coming. My double bind is about the burden of legal compliance documents, or in Minnesota we use the term due process, placed on special education teachers, traditionally referred to in the field as all the paperwork. The position we are placed in to provide high quality, individualized instruction and emotionally demanding and necessary care delivery, predicated on an immense technical workload burden of legal compliance, is a quagmire I have been in for 14 years, and I cannot wrap my head around how we got here or where we are going, how we can go forward. So what I did was I just studied my time. So I have some very brief results of a 75-day time study I did looking at minutes I worked on and completed special education documents this school year. I aim to present these results within the context of labor solutions and collective action. Like my co-presenters today, coming up with what to say to enumerate a double bind was a process in professional and personal self-examination. And so getting to share this with you today feels like such a privilege. So the question I pose today is, could labor solutions address the double bind facing special education teachers by influencing policy and funding? Or should workload issues be better addressed with a more comprehensive look at special education legislation, IDEA? And I think it's worth noting that the question we should be asking ourselves as well is IDEA liberatory also? So sort of my piece is about the paperwork and everything like that, but I'm not going to go into it today, but I think it's important to be critical of the legislation we use to govern students with disabilities in this moment. I choose to contextualize my case in labor action because as a Minneapolis teacher, I went on strike in March of 2022 for 14 school days. On a district level, going on strike was an extremely effective and district-altering action. It changed each one of us in different ways, but it was an extremely professionally important experience, and I think we're all better for it. The contract language, one specific just to special education teachers and our workload, was mildly disappointing. And a memorandum of agreement that we did win provides an additional 55 minutes of due process time or paperwork time per day after a teacher's caseload reaches 23, So after 23 students, I would be allowed 55 more minutes of time daily to write, process, and file paperwork. However, at 23 students, it is unlikely you would be able to function for that much time without students with you because of the demand of their care, to say nothing of the demand of high quality instruction. That time cannot simply appear without harming the students the paperwork is intending to protect. I include this brief information about this memorandum because it's sort of a microcosm of this double bind. So I have my little cogs here. These were created by Microsoft Word. So yeah. Janelle's like, make the cogs bigger. I'm like, I didn't even make the graphic. So documents I'm referring to include evaluations, IEPs, progress reports, due process documents that ensure FAPE have firm deadlines with narrow possibilities for streamlining or expediting, leading to students being protected by those plans with care and instruction from a distracted, sometimes totally unavailable teacher. Teachers who can't do what they've said they're going to do lack self-efficacy, which for me is what leads to my burnout. If I sit in a meeting with a parent, and I say, let's do this, and I get back to my classroom and I can't make it happen, So my final cog says that burnout depletes a teacher's ability to access the supports they do have, or for the purposes of contextualizing this within labor solutions, let's take it a step further to say it depletes the teacher's bandwidth for understanding their contract. Like, for example, knowing about a memorandum that provides them 54 of these glorious extra minutes. Knowing that our district has a labor committee with union representation and admin representation would be another example of something. If you don't know that, you can't access that. So the details of the time study are that from December 1st until 2 Fridays ago, I documented the daily minutes I spent writing and processing documents. So 75 days of data, and again, if you're still wondering why did you document your time, I just wanted to know. I wanted to share with you today how much time I spent doing this. Because people at the top have been telling me this is possible, so it must be possible, right? Besides the raw number, I also just wanted to understand workflow patterns and put them against labor contractual provisions and see if, what we can do. As Dr. Pamperin said, let's solve this, please. Anyway, so here's what I can included in the time study, and here's what I didn't. Important to note that even though meetings are legally required and monitored, I didn't feel it was appropriate to include them. Meeting with families is incredibly important. There's no way you would be able to, get rid of that or alter that in any way, I don't think. The only exception to a guideline to not include face-to-face interactions is for the one-on-one testing portion of my job. In my position, I don't have an assessment person doing assessments, so I'm doing all of those duties as well. So although I make sure to write doable and implementable evaluation plans and take the help for testing where I can get it, I still wanted to document how much time testing was required of me to stay in compliance with 3-year evaluation timelines and initial evals. I have 21 students, which is a large number for me and the population that I serve, but okay, so from December 1st until March 31st, I worked on these documents for 50 hours is what I came up with, which amounts to well over 1 work week or 6.7 days of work. If I decided to just scale that to 189 duty days, and that's 16.9, 7.5 hour work days. This would assume that your workload would be consistent across the school year, but there's a couple other, so I tested for 6 hours. I actually only wrote documents 45% of my days, which I'll kind of talk about, and then 11 of the days I spent over 2 hours writing. So I just graphed it. Special education workflow that I'm talking about is primarily a writing task. Teachers are obviously accustomed to doing box checking items, shooting emails, checking with colleagues, making copies quickly, so special ed paperwork is really no different. Therefore, some of the smaller tasks went unaccounted for, like a meeting notice, for example, is an example of a document that doesn't take very long to file. But heavy documents like evals and IEPs are accomplished normally in larger than 20 to 30 minute increments of writing. It takes a while to get into the flow. The writing intensity amounts to days where it was not uncommon for me to work on due process for 100 minutes. So you have, anyway, this up and down pattern of workflow. That's what the workflow looks like. Special education documentation is based on a 12-month calendar, so IEP and eval workflow don't match grading periods or student need. It's interesting to note that because of this, most teachers don't necessarily, like I said, do paperwork every day. There's lots of zeros in there. In my current caseload, half a day or a day set aside weekly would be enough to keep me in compliance. So what is already contractually addressing this need? I have 3 due process days per year that I get, and there's a sub, paid sub. I'm out I'm out the planning time for that sub, but and then I have the record keeping or grading days at the end of every quarter. So during this time study, I took 4.5 of those days altogether. Both kinds of days can be inefficient since I also pair them with when someone schedules random midday meetings. And I tend to use my record keeping days for preparing instruction for the new quarter. So as a result, the most amount of time in any day I was actually able to write was 4 hours. Another labor item that helps address this in Minneapolis is we do have a joint committee of administration and union leaders just about the labor of special education teachers that meets monthly. They give surveys and try to come up with solutions to workload issues. Although I can't go into it now, Education Minnesota's legislative agenda is comprehensive and ambitious. Our statewide union representation names items like more prep time and reducing caseload size, which leads me to my just 3 recommendations that I think would be what I would say for how to address this. I'm sure many districts already do things like this, but none of it is mandated, protected, or expected. And so that's why we're here today to talk to you. So the first one would just be that assessment teams are standard. The fact, during the course of this 75 days, I happened to be in the middle of 3 initial evaluation timelines. One of those students didn't even qualify for special education, and so, why can't someone else do that labor, that work? And then after analyzing the workload, I've come around to the idea of a due process specialist that specializes in writing the documents, and then the practitioner would then implement them. And then the last one is the ratios. Professionals that work with students with more pronounced disabilities have ratios closer to 8 to 1. I work with students that are very independent. They're in class most of the day, and so it looks like 21 isn't a big number, but at the same time, when you think about the paperwork, load of those 21, it's a large load. So adjusting those ratios, I think, would really help. So thank you so much. That's all I have.